Our lives are a string of insights, flashes of inspiration that can be the catalyst for new ideas. However, our pace of life these days means we tend to miss some of them completely. I'm Dave Hill, and I'm the host of the Simple Reflections podcast, a fortnightly series of interviews with people from all walks of life. Our conversations are an invitation to reflect on some of the simple insights my guests have had that have gone on to have a profound impact on their lives. So grab a cuppa and a biscuit, join us, slow down for a little while and see what shows up for you. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Simple Reflections podcast. Today I'm joined by Barbara Smith. Barbara is a 3 Principles-based mental health practitioner based out of Massachusetts and the Azores. She splits her time quite nicely there. And she's the co-author of a book called Addiction, One Cause, One Solution. Barbara, welcome. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you.
No, well, it's a pleasure. You and I met, I think, last summer in Glasgow when you and Christian McNeill, who you co-authored the book with, were talking about the book, bringing people together. And I love the energy that you brought to that and the curiosity that you had for the people in the room and seeing where they were and taking it from there. So, addiction is quite a tricky topic for some. I just wondered maybe what led you to write the book and what you've seen in terms of working with your clients, with addiction in mind.
Well, Christian and I met through Harry Durbitsky and Greg Suki's alcohol addiction and the 3 Principles. I was a speaker on that several times, and Christian heard me, and she reached out to me, and we just sort of got together. I invited her to come to the Azores, and she came, and we were saying, I really would like to write a book. And I said, well, I'd really like to write a book on addiction. And so we just sort of started that way. Christian is a recovering alcoholic, and I have worked in the field of addictions as a mental health practitioner for about 40 years. And when I first learned these principles, when I first really had my first major insight into how the principles work in our life, I really started to see for the first time why what worked when you had, when clients experience some degree of success, and why it didn't work when it didn't work. And it just sort of clarified things for me. It was like, I could see. I've always been a big fan of 12-step recovery. Mm-hmm. But I mostly was referred people who didn't want to have anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. And so I was sort of seen as the one who could, if you will, spoon feed the good parts of 12-step recovery to people and hopefully keep them from recoiling from some of the less wise aspects of it. Mm-hmm. So I think Christian and I bonded around that we both, neither one of us were seeing people who were having these amazing wake-up calls from the principles solely. And there certainly is a growing population of support network for addictions around the world, but nothing that even comes close to the 12-step 365 days a year mm-hmm. in every country, literally in the world. So we really wanted to sort of bridge the worlds of the two, which felt important to us because we felt like there was a message getting out there that, it's all thought. Yeah, it's just thought. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. You can drink again. Even if that wasn't being said directly, there was an implication of that. And we both have been around addiction long enough to know, that's not a good message to be giving out to people. So we wanted to bridge the wisdom of not only 12-step recovery, but just basically wisdom in the world that has been guiding addicts and alcoholics. And we started from the premise that the only thing that ever wakes people up or helps them to begin their journey to recovery is insight. Either one whopper, where you wake up with your head in a toilet and you say, this is it for me. What am I doing? And the world becomes clarified. Or for most people, this series of insights that just sort of chip away at the mental constructs that have kept it in place for so long. And pointing people towards that right at the outset seemed really important to us. So that's what we did. We created a book that was based on the way we were both trained, which was in something called the single paradigm in principles land, which I think is a word that becomes sort of a lightning rod, but was very helpful to both of us. In terms of seeing the simplicity that it really is a paradigm shift away from an old model of how things work to a clearer understanding of how things actually work. And in the field of mental health, we've been working with the wrong model, which was why we weren't having success. So that is sort of a long answer to your question, but that's how we got started with it. And that's I think, how well, it worked out. I mean, we just really ran with it. And the book was done in 3 months. It
Amazing.
happened. Yeah, it was just an amazing process. So
yeah, that's cool. There's, you touched on something there, which I think probably a lot of people wrestle with, which is, well, this looks like the right way to go, but why aren't I going down that? Why aren't I following the logic of that? And you mentioned that, there are sometimes it works and you're spotting why that is now, and sometimes it didn't. And you're also spotting why that might be the case. That is something I think people wrestle with, because I think certainly when it comes to addiction and various other tricky subjects like that, no one wants to be, in that position, but also seemingly can't seem to follow what on the outside looks like a very logical thing of stopping doing what it is you're doing, that yourself is damaging to you and the relationships that you have in the world, but seemingly are unable to change. I just wondered if you might expand on what it was that you saw in there that opened up the door, I suppose.
Sure. Well, first of all, what I saw was that no one was getting better. That was, very, very few people were getting better in the field of addictions. I worked for an addiction clinic in Washington, D.C. for about 12 or 14 years. And we had, what we would call retreads, who just kept coming back and back and back. And that was just sort of the way it was. You came back and you came back and you came back and you relapsed and you relapsed and you relapsed. And it was good for business. They were very busy, and they kept opening more and more and more clinics. But it was just sort of assumed that was the nature of the beast. And to a certain degree it is. But, there's also, I think there was an expectation. I worked at a public clinic near me in Massachusetts, and there was a 15-page history that we took. 15 pages of what had happened to this person in their life, including what was your mother doing when she was pregnant with you? And what, and again, just people searching desperately for an answer of how this worked, how this happened, how you got here, how to get out of it. I mean, to me, that was one of the cinch points for me to really say, this is not working, And so as a result, what you had was a group of people addicts who were chronic victims. They had a horrible childhood. I had I remember one of the questions is how many times were we bullied in school? And, it just set up this mindset of victimhood that people really believed was what made people mentally unhealthy and led them to addiction. So I had one client as he was learning this, he's like, yeah, I used to drive for that treatment center. I drive people back and forth to their halfway house. And he said, everybody was a victim. Everybody was a victim. It was the cops, it was the ex-wife, it was and so that was the light bulb that came on for me. When you really are taught and believe and are told by a person with a degree on the wall that your misery is coming from the circumstances in your life and that you have been altered by that permanently, you're stuck. Mm-hmm. It's a trap. And we can't, and it's, how do you get out of that unless someone shows you the truth of where your experience is really coming from? It doesn't mean the experiences didn't happen. I don't mean to make light. I've worked with veterans and, people who had terrible, terrible events outside of the normal human experience, horrors. But when you are told that is the source of your ongoing unhappiness, it becomes a prison of its own making.
Yeah.
And there is no way out from that until you see that's, and I think one of the wonderful things about teaching the single paradigm is that it only works one way. It only works that, it doesn't work both ways, that your experience is coming from your thinking and your circumstances, which is the way we were classically trained. Mm-hmm. We knew that thought had a lot to do with it, but we also thought that, circumstances were a big part of it. It looks like it makes sense on the surface, but the results were that very few people were getting better. I had a very full practice of people who had been coming to see me sometimes for up to 12 years, and we were still talking about their mother. Mm-hmm. And after a while, some of us are slower learners than others, but after a while, you have to say, what are we doing here? And I used to have other mental health practitioners who would say that, I'm so burned out. Like, what are we doing here? There really is no cure. Well, there wasn't a cure because we were using the wrong model. Mm-hmm. We were using a model that innocently was, keeping the problems going.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point. The innocence of it. It was, all of these things are done with the best of intentions to try and help people, but that doesn't necessarily provide the solution. And what is so lovely about looking in this direction is the curiosity and the openness of it that takes you beyond that feeling of being a victim potentially. So it'd be really interesting to see what your thoughts are now that you are working from a different angle, and how you're seeing that show up in your clients' lives these days.
Well, I think your two words, openness and curiosity, are the key for anyone. And in AA, there's a saying, how, honesty, openness, and willingness. And to me, that is the heart of it for anyone. When you can open your mind to seeing what's being taught here, it's transformational. 75% of my clients, literally 75% of my clients within 6 weeks of working with this were thanking me and leaving my practice. And I was getting a little financially insecure at that point. Like, now what am I going to do? And Keith Blevins, bless him, said, well, you get more clients, So, but getting better really never occurred to me as an option, like putting what happened to you behind you and moving forward. So it was a real turnaround for me. I mean, I remember feeling like my head was on backwards for a while. My teeth ached. It was like, wow, what? But I just knew that I could see how free people felt from this. And I would run into them in various places, in the grocery store, at the farmer's market, and they'd say, oh, I'm doing so much better. I feel so much better. Wish I'd known this, 20 years ago. It's like, I wish I had too, So yeah, I think, I've been in the mental health profession for 45 years, and I know many wonderful, wonderful, and wonderful, wonderful mental health practitioners who wanted nothing more than to help their clients. Mm-hmm. And we just settled into this world of thought, this belief that we could sort of help people limp along to the finish line, that we would be good listeners and offer tea and sympathy. I think that was my best thing, was tea and sympathy. But when someone is open to see that there's something more than that, I don't know that I could have seen this before I did, but when someone is open, whatever it is that makes us ready, mm-hmm. It's amazing to see what can happen. But the openness is key, because typically when we're, as humans, I think part of the human condition is typically when we are presented with something that we don't understand, it's very easy to disregard it. Mm. And I really struggled with that myself at first. I was like, no, I need CEUs, I need continuing education credits. No. But, there was something that kept pulling me back. That curiosity kept pulling me back, that I'm so grateful for now. Mm. But without that, when someone's mind is locked and loaded, and I've seen a lot of people since I've learned this who like, no. I mean, you can tell the head shakers, no. They just don't want to, they just can't conceive of something other than what they've always known, that I have this. I am an addict. I am damaged goods. I do have PTSD. It's something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And they're the ones who typically have not done well. Mm. So even though it's so much of a change and so much of a departure from what we've always seen and heard, when you can open your mind to it and be curious to see, well, all right, as one of my friends said, I had no idea what you're talking about, but I wanted what you had,
Yeah. It's that curiosity that's so exciting. Both from our side of the fence, being the one hopefully guiding somewhere, something down a direction that's quite cool, and let's see what we find, because who knows. There's a sort of infectious element to that in terms of the energy that produces, but we're also alive to spotting it in other people, and they might not witness it in themselves because they're living thought to thought anyway, and we all have insight all the time. We have done our whole lives. We get an opportunity to call it out and go, right, what's just happened there? What have you just seen? And unpack that moment for them. I loved what you said a second ago regarding when you were first introduced to this, and it just didn't feel quite right. That tackiness to it. I've noticed both in myself and people around me since I've been looking in this direction that is the core of how we learn things. This is rocking my worldview at the moment. I don't like the look of that. I'm going to be wary of it. I want to check this out. None of that's a problem. None of that's a problem. That's the curiosity with a bit of caution thrown in, that the system doing what it's designed to, of going at things gently, testing it out. But we have a habit, unfortunately, of going, no, shut that one off. I'm going to carry on with my my worldview as it is at the moment, albeit I know it's a bit dented and broken from the way I see it and the way other people might see it, but actually it's mine and I understand it. And stepping outside of that feels unsafe, which is a really logical way of looking at it, if that's all you've ever known. But getting the opportunity to look around the sides of all of that and go, well, is it really true? Have you always been like that? You know, has that, despite the fact you think you are whatever it is you've decided you are today, I bet you there's periods in the last 10, 20, 30 years that you've been living like this, that you have felt joy and complete peace of mind. And if that's true, then maybe that's a possibility for you right now.
Yeah.
And it's fun being able to play in that space, despite where someone might be, in a completely respectful way, but try and hold a light space for people that allows them to see beyond the heaviness of their experience.
Yeah. And I see this role for us as just being as pointing towards something, and people will follow the finger as far as they, their line of vision can carry it at that moment. And when they see more, they'll do better, So I think that patience, the woman my first mentor in the principles was very patient with me. I tended not to be patient at first. I was like, come on, it's right in front of your eyeballs. What's wrong? And, I've gotten a little better. But it's, I think just helping people to look in this direction is so critical. And just point out, like you said, the things that have always been happening in your life. I have a list of words for insight. My business is called Gifts of Insight. And so we have a sort of a running list of other words for insight. I think we have like 25 or 26. Cool. Sorry about the rooster.
That's right. It's all good.
So we have, 25 or 26 different words for insight that are happening all the time. So when we can start to bring that into our awareness, just how often these things, these aha moments, these moments of clarity, these, moments where we just see things differently. I can't think of them now, of course, off the top of my head, but it was fun with clients early on to have them bring in new words, new words that like, oh yeah, that's another one. There's another one. The penny dropped, or hindsight. I heard that once in a talk by Keith Blevins. Hindsight is insight. That's brilliant. Of course it is. Every time we look back over our shoulder and we see something different, right. That's the system at work. And when people are looking in that direction, Elsie Spittle calls it the sacred space where the unknown becomes known. Wow. That's at our back this whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting.
It's exciting. It's really exciting.
It's sort of, there's in a sort of subject matter expert client relationship, there's an expectation that the subject matter expert will remain that way and is in a position of authority in a way. What I've noticed with this understanding is we're more equals, actually. Yes, I'm responsible for the direction of travel at the moment, but what we see together on this journey, who knows? Let's see where that goes. There is a sort of openness to explore that is different from quite a lot of that subject matter expert client relationship, where it's I know something you don't and I'm going to tell you about it, and you may always think that I'm the expert. I quite like the collegiate way that we get to work with this understanding and see where that collectively takes us. whether that's two people or a group of people. I'm one of that group, or I'm one of those two. And it's, it's knowing that there's just as much for me to learn on this journey as there is for the individual or individuals I'm working with.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed that thrills me and delights me at this point is that all of my clients, without exception, and I sort of refer to them now as students, but all of them refer to me as a friend.
Yeah.
This is my friend, and in the world of psychotherapy, that is not okay. Not okay. Definitely not okay. And, wow. How sad is that? How sad is that?
Yeah. Well,
you have to maintain a separate, and that doesn't mean I don't have clinical judgment. Mm-hmm. I know. His boundaries getting a little fuzzy here, but for the most part, I have to say it's been very therapeutic for them to know that we are on equal footing. And even when I was doing traditional psychotherapy, when I would share my life, some of the things that were going on, people would say, oh, that's so helpful because it doesn't make me feel like I'm the one who's the patient and I'm so screwed up and I'm so broken and you have it all together. So I've always, I think, tried to humanize that for people. But I think now more than ever, when we see that we're all dealing with the same stuff, that we all have thought storms and we all replay these things and we all do these things that, maybe we'd like to do less of, but, it's just part of what it means to be human and the way the mind works. And we just don't take it all so seriously. I think that really sets up a very, very different dynamic in the relationship, which I think is very healing for anyone, whether you're in an office or taking a walk or meeting a stranger in the street.
Completely. No, the sort of rapport element of human connection has a really restorative quality all on its own without necessarily saying anything. Just feeling heard and seen and experiencing someone else's company in its entirety, rather than them being, for potentially professional reasons, putting up boundaries to secure the relationship in that, there is a responsibility element here. I need to create boundaries. Well, that's got a very different feeling to being seen as another human being by another human being. And certainly from speaking from my perspective as a veteran, it's something that I've seen and witnessed all the way through my military career. There were people that had clear, defined boundaries about their position and their role, and that was fine. That was them. And there were others that were a little bit looser around it, and people seemed to warm to that more. And problems got solved a little bit more simply, or didn't arise in the first place. I was always curious about that. I just thought that was a personality trait, that some people were better at it than others. What I've come to see now is that is available to everybody. And those that are putting up the professional boundaries are doing it to protect themselves and those around them. So they're doing it for all the right reasons, but normally unnecessarily. It's like wearing.
Well, I think they've been taught that, these are, and so in the field of psychotherapy, we're looking at people through a lens of pathology. Mm-hmm. These people are sick, and so the people who, shy away from entering psychotherapy or coming to talk to a therapist or even talking to anyone, is the fear that they're going to be seen as damaged goods. Mm-hmm. And they don't want someone to tell them that they're damaged goods. Now, some people relish that. They come in and they're like, oh, I'm so damaged. I'm so broken. I'm so sick. I have all these things wrong with me. I'm like, no, you don't. And then, it's, again, those who are open are like, really? And those who aren't will go running out of the room. But I think when people are taught, that this is the role, this is how you behave. And I'm sure it's the same in the military as it is in psychotherapy. And I work with some psychoanalytic types, who, if someone was late, would like punish them. I mean, it was like, really? Like, aren't you ever late? Doesn't your kid ever throw up on the way out of the door? I mean, really? I mean, it just seemed so inhumane to me. And I think when we can be in touch with our own humanity and with an open heart, the other thing that I've seen personally in my life is that even though I've stopped trying to shove this down people's throats, which is a good thing, people I keep hearing from people, friends all over the place. I just want to come spend some time with you. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating because I know that I'm just happier and lighter and easier to be around. And that's very appealing to people. I don't have to make a point or convince anyone of anything. And I think that is part of the journey when you first learn this. You just want to shout it from the rooftops. But once you can see that living it is far more effective, again, in AA, they call it a program of attraction and not promotion. And when you realize that the more attractive you are as a human being, and that's not physical attraction, obviously, but just joyful and at peace and accepting of what is, the more drawn people are to that. It's puzzling to them. They don't really understand why, but that's okay. They don't need to.
No, absolutely. And it's true for all of us all the way through our lives. When we've struggled with something, we've looked to people that we know, that feel right, if that makes sense. There's a feeling element to why people go and seek certain people out for assistance. And it is that sort of law of attraction element, I suppose. They can't say why. They just go, I could do with someone's company, and these people will probably fit the bill for me right now. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
I think though, to some degree, I think what most people seek out is people who agree with their worldview. So that's the definition of drama in our world, in our workplaces and things. Most people don't seek out people who are going to offer them a different way, a different perspective. So when you I do the same thing. I still do. When I have a scuffle with someone in my life, I'll call someone who I know agrees with me. Oh yeah, they're the problem. But when I can turn the camera on myself, then I can see so much more clearly and so much more deeply. So yeah, I think absolutely this always has been happening. But I think as humans, we can really get off track till we understand, till we learn to question, wait a minute, wait. What is it about this that's drawing me to this? Or what is it about this that, is emanating from me instead of from them? But I think that what I've described, that habit of us going to, the people who agree with us, you're never going to find someone who fully agrees with everything you say. You may find somebody who agrees with 70% of what you say. And that's why there are so many, by the way, so many denominations in Protestantism, because you'll have a group of people who will break off from one group because they all agree on something. And then there's somebody who doesn't quite agree with that part of it. And so they'll split off into their other, and that's been happening. It's like, it's just been multiplying over the years. I think there are now like 1,000 different Protestant denominations, because it's so typically what happens. But now, again, with this understanding, with these principles, we can see, oh, that's what's happening. I'm looking to have my experience validated, my separate reality validated. And I'm going to people who are going to validate that instead of going to people. I mean, well, most of the great leaders in the world over history have gone to people who held out a different point of view for them to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that, and you're not as threatened by it. Doesn't mean you don't get threatened. I'd love to have people tell me how great I am all the time. But I also know that's not real.
Yeah. That's cool. I wonder, is there anything that any projects or things that you've got running at the moment that the listeners might be interested in hearing about? If you've got anything happening?
No. How about that? I really, I am not trying to push the river anymore. I turned 70 this year, and I gave up my psychotherapy practice in that I no longer accept insurance. And it was amazing how many people left when someone wasn't paying for it. So I've just sort of been seeing where this takes me. And when opportunities arise, I respond. I love the work. I love working with people. I love doing intensives. I love the intimacy of that experience. I do once a year, I do a retreat of the people that I've worked with. And that's really feeds me. But other than that, I just sort of wait to see what shows up. And the good news is at this point in my career, I don't have to support myself with this. So I know there are a lot of people out there who do. And, but I just, I love doing it. But mostly at this point, I'm living my life and seeing what shows up, what opportunities I have. And it's been amazing. I took on the presidency of an organization back in Massachusetts, and just seeing how it's flourishing, just because I know what I know now.
Yeah.
People are like, wow, you can't wait. They have no idea why it's flourishing, but it's like, I understand something now that makes working with people a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
So that's, I guess, where I am at this point in my life and my career. I don't have anything to sell. I'm just living it and seeing what shows up.
Well, thank you for being you and doing exactly that, because it has, it does have an impact on the people around you quite clearly. So thank you so much. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the conversation, feel free to subscribe and join me and my new guest next time. If you're interested in the work I'm doing, or you think I can be of service to you or your organisation, please email dave@simplicityofmind.co.uk. Remember, see if you can find time to slow down and reflect. Those simple ideas might be worth listening to. Take care, and I hope you can join me in a couple of weeks.